Good afternoon. And it's nice of you to start out with such a broad disclaimer. Don't follow any advice that I give on this our presentation because, well, you can follow it because I believe in it and I'll take responsibility for it. And if you want to find out more about what I do and believe in, I'd like you to go to my website, which is free for an unlimited time. It's drmcdougall.com. But I'm really pleased to be here because this gives me a chance to talk about something that's really, really important to me. Let's just kind of get right into it. What I'd like to talk to you about is solving today's most serious problems. And it's with the food. And you're going to hear a focus of go vegan. I'm going to extend it a little further than that. But we have some really big problems facing us that we have to solve, or, plain and simple, things are not going to be good. I've been in medicine for over 50 years. I've taken care of people in a lifestyle residential setting for 44 years. I've taken care of people with I've taken care of over 12,000 patients. And I've done it with very simple things like fixing the food, getting a little exercise, cleaning up some bad habits, some clean air, some clean water. I mean, that's been my approach. It is the low-tech approach, a little sunshine. Whereas what I was trained as a medical doctor, I'm a board-certified internist. What I was trained as a medical doctor is to use high-tech, the latest and greatest drugs, technology, devices, surgery. Everybody's looking for the high-tech solution. But you know what? In my 44 years of experience, I can tell you, the solutions to problems come from low-tech, not high-tech. Very expensive high-tech, lots of side effects, and so little benefit. The past 16 years, I've been focusing on climate change, trying to keep our happy home, planet Earth. And that's the main reason that I feel this is a real opportunity for me to talk to you, is to talk to you about my beliefs on how we can add to this battle, this fight, this war to save planet Earth. I started getting interested in this 17 years ago when my first grandson was born. Changed my whole focus, my whole life. Any of you who are grandparents know exactly what I'm talking about. And what I was told 16 years ago when I got interested in climate change is the solution will come out of technology. We're still being told technology, or carbon capture, high tech. Somebody's going to invent something. Well, I think that we have as much chance of that happening as UFOs coming to planet Earth and aliens, galactic aliens, saving us by sucking up the carbon out of the atmosphere. No, we're going to have to deal with this one with low-tech approaches too, such as getting rid of the carbon, right? Well, I'm also going to talk to you about the importance of a healthy diet and solving the problems of climate change. And over the last, a little more than a year, we've been confronted with a world-changing pandemic, the virus COVID-19. And people have been looking for a high-tech solution, treatments and vaccinations and so on. If you've been following the news, you can see that there are a lot of shortcomings to this approach, to say the very least, the variants that are developing that will likely be resistant to the vaccines and other high-tech approaches. Whereas the way you deal with this problem too is with low-tech, simple solutions, public health measures, wearing masks, washing your hands, social distancing. And as I'm going to share with you, a starch-based diet. As a matter of fact, a starch-based diet is central. It's the common denominator in our major health crises that have been affecting us in the past and will affect us in the future. Diet is the common denominator to chronic diseases, climate change, and infectious diseases. And there are all kinds of offshoots to these particular problems. financial complications. They affect people's personal appearance. It involves your religious faith. We bring into this discussion important issues that I know are really important to you, such as animal suffering and, of course, loss of habitat. And me as a medical doctor, I've always been concerned about human suffering. Well, let's talk about the role that diet plays in these various major issues, these three issues. Let's talk about chronic disease. As a medical doctor, I take care of mostly chronic diseases. And these chronic diseases I found are due to food poisoning. Well, there are other chronic diseases that doctors take care of that are due to poisonings, like tobacco poisoning or alcohol poisoning. Well, occasionally lead poisoning, arsenic poisoning. What do you do to solve problems of poisoning? You stop the poisons and the body naturally heals, right? Well, that's the approach that I've taken over the last 44 years, is tried to identify the source of people's illnesses and have them fix that problem. The source, the food poisons are very simple. They fit into two categories. They're animal foods and free oils like olive oil, canola oil, safflower oil. Free oils, in other words, they're outside of the olive. And any animal products are the two categories of food poisonings. And the results, these are diseases of food poisoning. They're obesity, which affects somewhere around 30-40% of the population, soon to be as much as 70% of the population in the United States. 80% right now are overweight. And people who are obese, they have other problems like diabetes, heart disease, cancer, things that I take care of as a board-certified internist. Diabetes. In the United States, 14% of people are diabetic, type 2 diabetes, and half the people are pre-diabetic. And both type 1 and type 2 diabetes are caused by the rich Western diet. But if I talk to you during this lecture about diabetes, what I'm talking to you about is type 2 diabetes, unless I say otherwise. And of course, there are complications of diabetes, such as kidney failure and heart attacks, early death, osteoporosis, gangrene, etc. Heart disease. We're talking about diseases of your arteries. We're talking about 44,000 miles of arteries that get affected by food poisoning, by animal products and vegetable oils. These arteries get rotten, and whatever's affected as far as an organ is concerned, we named that disease after that organ that's compromised. For example, the heart. If you close down the blood vessels in the heart, you have a heart attack. In the brain, you have a stroke. You close down the arteries to the penis and you become impotent. Various kinds of arthritis are due to food poisoning, like, well, they're the inflammatory arthritises, rheumatoid, psoriatic, and lupus, and nonspecific arthritis. Various kinds of cancer like colon, breast, prostate, uterus. Where would you think that intestinal problems come from but what you input into your intestines? And so we have the people who invented the purple pill educating us about gastroesophageal reflux disease. So kind of them to create a market. And of course, people are buying all kinds of acids because they're sick. The intestinal tract is sick beginning at the top and sick also at the bottom. Constipation, I can tell you as a medical doctor, having the ability to ask people very personal questions, constipation's the norm. So these foods are due to food poisonings. The food poisonings are animal foods and oils. Some of you are sitting there thinking, there's nothing left to eat. That's my whole diet is animal foods and oils. Well, there's another way of looking at this. And that is that you should eat a diet based on starch. One of the reasons you should eat a diet based on starch is because almost everybody who's walked planet Earth has lived on starch-based diets, the diets of human beings. We are starchivores, starchitarians, starch eaters. Think about it. Immediately, what comes to mind, I bet for most of you, is the diet of people in Asia, based on rice, right? Before 1980, 90% of the diet was rice. Had to be white rice. It's not a deal breaker. Or if we talk about, you throw in a little history, we talk about the people in Central America. Go back a ways, the Aztecs and the Mayans. These were known as the people of the corn. The American Indian lived on corn. Look further south, South America and the Andes. These are potato eaters. How about the Middle East? That's known as the breadbasket of the world. We're starch eaters, and we've obtained the bulk of our calories from starches up until we became rich. We might have become rich 3,000 years ago because we happened to be a king or a queen or a pharaoh. And instead of eating the starches, we would eat the animals that ate the starches. And guess what? Kings and queens have been getting fat and sick with the gout and heart disease and diabetes for thousands of years. Rich foods make people sick. The bulk of populations live on starches, potatoes, rice, corn, wheat. So once you get your mind around the idea that you are a starchivore, a starch eater, then you have control. Then you can satisfy your hunger drive. Then you can eat foods that are not only good for you, but they're good for the animals and good for the planet. And you can be happy because you love these foods. Yes, you do. To the starch-based diet, you add some non-starchy vegetables like lettuce and kale and cauliflower and maybe some fruits. That would be the way you design the ideal diet for reversing disease, preventing the destruction of your body and your family's body. That's a diet also that we're going to use to change planet Earth around and save our home. The work that I've been doing for the last 44 years has been published in several medical journal articles. I'd just like to show you three of the more recent ones. We did a study of 1,703 of our patients that went through our residential program in Santa Rosa, California. We included everybody in this particular study. And we fed them ad libitum, a starch-based diet. In other words, they got to eat as much as they wanted. And they had medical care. And we obtained information on them, and we varied medications depending upon how well they did. The average weight loss eating as much as people wanted was over 3 pounds. The average drop in cholesterol was as good as you can get with statin drugs, 22 milligrams per deciliter. The average decrease in blood pressure in people that should be on blood pressure medications was 18 over 11 millimeters of mercury. And you know what? We got nearly 90% of people to reduce or stop their medications, in particular medications to use to treat high blood pressure and diabetes. This study is uncontested. It's free. You can look it up. Read it yourself. The second major study that was done on the McDougall program was done by Oregon Health and Science University. This is the medical school in Portland. This study was done completely independent of me, except for the education. I taught the participants how to eat. I taught them at my residential program in Santa Rosa, California. If I were going to repeat the experiment today, we don't have a residential program anymore in Santa Rosa, California. We do an online telemedicine, telehealth, teleeducation program. By the way, we've assessed the results of this program. And we're getting better results than we ever got at the residential program for about a third the cost to the participant. But anyway, we took these people through the residential program, Oregon Health and Science University, the investigators, top scientists. They collected the data, they picked the patients, they followed up on the patients, they did all of the follow-up evaluation of their laboratory tests, and they wrote the scientific paper. And this paper is free. It's available to you. You just look up it in the journal Multiple Sclerosis, Related Disorders, and you'll find it there, open access. And what this study shows are the results of participants over a 1-year period of time. Remember, the last study was only over 7 days. This is over a 1-year period of time. The average weight loss was nearly 20 pounds. The average cholesterol drop was 19 milligrams per deciliter. They were able to reduce their insulin levels as well as tremendous improvement in their fatigue. But probably the most important thing about this study, remember, completely analyzed, evaluated, and reported independent of me by the investigators at Oregon Health and Science University. The most important finding was the compliance. People loved what they were doing. 85% of people stayed on the program over an entire 12-month period of time. You can't even get people to take medications at that rate. Why did they do it? Well, they saw such tremendous improvements in their health. Overall, they felt good and they loved the food. So why wouldn't you do it? Our work has also been studied outside of the country, outside of the United States, studied in New Zealand by a couple of young investigators. They used the McDougall diet, and over a 1 year period of time, they got what they brag of as the greatest weight loss sustained over a year period of time, which is a 25-pound weight loss at 1 year. They got a reduction in cholesterol very similar to what we got in our studies. Medication reductions, very similar. And also the adherence was similar. The people followed the program. Why? Because the results are fantastic. Cost nothing. Eat the foods that you love. And you're medication independent. And why does the program I use work so well? It's because of something very simple I'd like to share with you. And that is, we injure the body. And the body responds in various ways. And like, for example, we injure the body by smoking cigarettes. And the response is production of mucus, cough, and so on. How do we stop that repeated injury? We ask the individual to stop smoking. And what happens is the body heals. The body has a natural tendency to heal. It wants to be healthy. It doesn't want to be sick. All we have to do is identify the source of repeated injury and stop it. That repeated injury could come from heavy doses of alcohol or other dangerous drugs. But the most common source of repeated injury is the fork and spoon, which causes a whole load of diseases and suffering. You identify the source of repeated injury and you stop that behavior, and the body naturally heals. Let's go on and talk about the relationship between diet and climate change. I was first made aware of the trouble this planet was in by Al Gore in 2006. Al Gore did a lecture which was seen worldwide, changed the way people thought about our planet, called An Inconvenient Truth. It was shocking. And I think it did change the world, but Al Gore left out something very important in this lecture, and that was the livestock industry. Maybe because of his own personal diet, maybe because he was a Black Angus farmer. For whatever reason, he wasn't able to deal with it in 2006. I think Al Gore changed his diet. He looks like a healthier man to me these days, but still in the sequel to An Inconvenient Truth. In that particular lecture in 2017, he still didn't mention the diet. The same year came out a big report from the United Nations called Livestock's Long Shadow. And what they did is they looked at the impact of livestock, fish and beef and pork and chickens, etc., on greenhouse gases, global warming, and planetary destruction. And they came to a shocking conclusion, and that is that livestock agriculture accounts for 18% of the greenhouse gases. And compare that to transportation, which is fewer than 14% of greenhouse gases of CO2 production. Well, I kind of put these two things together and being very interested in diet to heal my patients. And I was pretty confident I had the diet that would do it. The next thought I have is, well, does this fit into other important truths, such as the climate change? Putting together the World Health Organization Livestock's Long Shadow report, along with findings brought out by Al Gore, it became obvious to me that we could make a huge impact on the planet by getting people to change to a diet that I call a starch-based diet. Some people call it a low-fat vegan diet. Some people call it a whole food, plant food-based diet. I think you need to have the word starch in there because that's where you have to get the calories from. You have to get them from rice, corn, potatoes, sweet potatoes, wheat. You have to have these higher calorie sources. Otherwise, it doesn't work. You'll never make it on cabbage and kale and broccoli. So I wrote my first paper on an inconvenient truth, and that is we're eating our planet to death, and I published that in December of 2006. We had something called the Advanced Study Weekends at my living resort in Santa Rosa, California. We hope to start these again as internet lectures and weekends. But one of the more important guests that we had was Robert Goodland. Robert Goodland was the World Bank's group's environmental advisor for 23 years. In other words, he advised the world on the environmental impacts of various behaviors that we have. And one of the things that he started looking at was the World Health Organization's livestock long shadow studies. And he and his group, they reanalyzed the data and they included things that needed to be included in the report. And they came to the conclusion that over half of the greenhouse gases are produced by the livestock industry. Half. The Eat Lancet Commission, they're probably the most respected organization that talks about the impact of what we eat on our planet. And their estimates are around 20 to 30% of the environmental destruction, the global warming gases are due to what we eat. And they've clearly come to the conclusion that we need to change our diet to save ourselves. And also they came to the startling conclusion that we don't have long left. They said fewer than 12 years. I've heard predictions that even call us to action sooner. Immediately, we need to go to action. The general understanding is that, well, we have to eat. We have to support the population, whatever population we have. And if you look at the environmental impact of various sources of calories, what you find is that starches like rice, corn, potatoes, wheat, they have a very small impact on the environment, whereas animal foods, and evenly surprising to some of you, farm fish, has a very negative impact. Again, animal products generate 70, 80% of the agricultural emissions. The livestock industry has been accused of at least contributing to half of the agricultural industry's production of CO2 gases. Going back to the Lancet Commission, the Lancet Commission actually looked at what happened with people changed their diet, and what they concluded was that you could get as much as a 50% reduction. This would be overnight if people went from an animal food-based diet to a starch-based vegan kind of diet. Overnight. Other researchers who have looked at this possibility, looked at the results of us making a dramatic but reasonable change, is that you could reduce the production of greenhouse gases by as much as 80% if you went to a vegan diet. So if half of the greenhouse gases or more are produced by the livestock industry, and we have the impact of cutting this in half, or maybe as high as 80% overnight, why are we waiting? At least as individuals. The impact of taking care of our planet, I believe, has to be the same as the impact of stopping the injury on my patients. 12,000 of them I've been taking care of for the last 44 years. When you stop the source of injury, the healing processes catch up. And so I believe will be that way with the planet if we stop the injury. You know where the injury comes from. The major source of the injury are the fossil fuel industry, but many other sources. And the livestock industry is the one that we need to focus on. Very few people are focusing on this industry. We need to focus on it because the implications are practical changes we can make to not only make a statement, which you do every time you change your diet, but actually make an impact on the carbon utilized as an individual. Let's go on to the third major problem we're confronting, and that is infectious diseases. We've got something called COVID-19 at our doorstep right now with a whole bunch of variants. But, even if we got an effective vaccine for COVID-19 or COVID-20 or COVID-22, these viruses are not going to stop. Because of the warming of the planet we're going to continue to have, because of crowding, not just in livestock, but people are going to continue to have pandemic after pandemic after pandemic. So what I'm going to tell you now, I think is extremely important. The first indication that COVID-19 had something to do with people's health and what they ate came from China, even before the disease went to Europe or the United States. What the Chinese noted was that those individuals who got COVID-19, got the virus that caused COVID-19, that the people who went on to hospitalization, need for a ventilator, and death were those people who had comorbid conditions. That means additional problems with their health, and these additional problems are due to chronic ailments. Chronic diseases like the ones we talked about in the beginning: heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, cancers. People who have these underlying conditions have a much worse outcome when it comes to getting infected with this virus. The CDC, that's the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, they came out with their report in 2020, the spring of 2020, and they noted also that people who have underlying conditions, obesity, heart disease, kidney disease, diabetes, they had 6 times the risk of hospitalization and 12 times the risk of death. In Europe, the British Medical Journal, one of the most respected journals out there, says that you need to fix the food if you want to survive this virus. There are all kinds of reasons a healthy diet helps prevent serious complications of this disease and future diseases. One is that if you eat a healthy diet, you have healthier barriers so that the viruses can't get in. When you eat the Western diet, you knock down your barriers between, say, your gut and the food in your gut and your bloodstream. Same thing with the respiratory barriers. You knock them down between the air and the bloodstream. And once these barriers become ineffective, then the infections have a real opportunity to get into the body. Plant foods have all kinds of substances, and you could go through days and books and so on to name the substances that have antiviral, anti-inflammatory, anti-disease activity. Plant foods are loaded with these components called phytochemicals. One of the interesting observations is that cholesterol, the body's burden of cholesterol, affects whether or not you go on to have serious complications. And what investigators found is that people who have high cholesterol levels, which would be those who have those comorbid conditions, right? You keep going back and you see, yes, those who eat the poisonous diet, yes, which is high cholesterol. Cholesterol is essentially only found in animal foods. So what they've identified is on the barrier between the bloodstream and the airway, on that barrier is a lipid raft, a raft that allows the virus to transfer across it from the outside into the bloodstream, into the lungs. It's called an ACE2 receptor. And that receptor, when it's combined with cholesterol, you end up having more permeable receptors, larger receptors, greater numbers of receptors. In other words, you absorb more efficiently the virus that causes COVID-19, the coronavirus, into your body, into your lungs, and you end up dying or really darn sick. The medical business, they realize this, and they put out a observation that this mechanism of cholesterol being involved in whether or not you end up having serious complications. Remember, cholesterol is just a marker as to how rich your diet is. So it's much broader than just pinpointing cholesterol. But the medical profession has drugs that pinpoint certain things. Here's one: statin drugs. They lower cholesterol, and they find a reduction of going on to more severe disease that was very significant by just taking statin drugs. Well, let me show you what we accomplish. This is in our basic study of nearly 1,700 people. We find a significant drop of cholesterol right away. The average drop in cholesterol is 22 points. And people who have very high cholesterol, they even get a greater drop in cholesterol in 7 days. This brings me to the thought that I believe that even after you get the diagnosis of COVID-19, even if at that time you eat the rich Western diet, I believe it's not too late. I see people heal in a 10-day or 12-day program. Now it's a 12-day program over the internet. And you see them heal. The body doesn't want to be sick. And you give it half a chance with some good food, guess what? All right. Well, hopefully I've well established for you the importance of a healthy diet, which happens to be a starch-based diet with the addition of fruits and vegetables, avoids animal foods. Hopefully I have convinced you that this is important and has a major impact on the things that are facing you individually as well as everybody on this planet. Your next question is, well, will people change their diet? Even if they know all this, even if they believe all this, will they change their diet? I'd like to talk to you about an experience that occurred a century ago. This was in Western Europe. This was World War I. And one of the primary battlefields was between England and Germany, which meant that you had to travel across the North Sea. And you see the position of Denmark in the North Sea between Germany and England. What the British did is they set up a blockade to starve the Germans. Between 1914 and 1918, the Germans did starve. 400,000 Germans suffered from severe malnutrition. Why? Because they stuck with the traditional, basic, well-balanced Western diet. In other words, you had to have a little meat, a little dairy. Couldn't change the major components of the diet. Note the position of England and Germany, and note Denmark and how Denmark was affected tremendously by this blockade. Mikhail Hinhede was a very famous nutritionist scientist back in the 18 and 1900s. He was a Dane, and he was friendly with the Danish government during World War I. And what he did is he brought his ideas to the government and suggested that what we need to do, because of the severe blockade, which included a blockade against food, what we need to do is we need to change the diet of the people living in Denmark. 3 million people, we need to change their diet. And what he pointed out was the obvious, and that is that you have to feed a lot of food to animals to get a few calories out of the animals. And so his suggestion was we stop eating the animals. Instead, we eat the foods the animals were eating, the soybeans, the potatoes, the grains. And so the people in Denmark, they changed their diet. So much so that unless you were a pig farmer, you didn't eat any pork. Unless you were one of the richest people in Copenhagen, you had no beef during the entire World War I period of time. Well, the results of this experience were published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. And this particular study talks about what happened to the Danes during World War I. What happened was nobody was hungry, nobody suffered, people enjoyed their food, and they had the lowest incidence of disease that the Danish population has ever experienced. They had a 34% reduction in illness during that period of time of, quote, deprivation, where they ate the foods that the animals ate. And note down at the purple line at the bottom, you might even suggest that infectious diseases decreased during this period of time. Maybe, but certainly chronic diseases, to the point, as I say, the people in Denmark have never experienced such a positive health picture as they did during this period of time. 3 million Danes became essentially low-fat vegan followers. This is the same period of time when we had the Spanish flu. Spanish flu has a lot of similarities to what we're going through now. The basic public health measures were the same back then as they are now: wearing masks, social distancing, washing hands. These basic health measures were the foundation of people who tried to fight off the Spanish flu. Oh, they tried to invent miracle drugs and vaccinations back in this time, but weren't effective. And so as many as 50 million people died of the Spanish flu worldwide. If you take a look at the mortality, excess mortality from the Spanish flu that occurred during that period of time, which happened to be the same period of time as World War I, the same period of time when Hinhidi got the population of Denmark to change their diet, what do you see? You see that Denmark has the lowest death rate of all European countries. In other words, to me, that's at least a suggestion that 100 years ago, people experienced dietary benefits to infectious diseases just like we could today. So you have two tools in your toolbox, folks. You can follow social distancing, or you can eat a good diet. These are things that will help you with any variant, any virus that comes out. Can we change? Well, I've seen people change in my lifetime. I'm nearly 74 years old, and so I've seen a lot. I saw Arthur Terry come in 1964 and publish the Surgeon General's report on smoking and health. And we listened and we changed. More than half the population smoked cigarettes before Luther Terry's report in 1964. Now fewer than 17% of the population smokes. And these are the people that are less fortunate, less opportunity, less education. Same thing with alcohol. A noontime lunch meeting wasn't a real meeting unless you downed 2 or 3 drinks. Now it's a social disgrace, just like smoking in public is a social disgrace. I hope soon, walking by the table of somebody who's still eating the Western diet, the thoughts of social disgrace come across your mind. And I hope that's the attitude that we develop worldwide. Not only to correct the problems I've been trying to correct for my whole medical career, chronic diseases like diabetes, heart disease, obesity. No, not just to correct those problems, but this time to give us a chance against the viruses. We need healthy people, and we need a whole bunch of good ideas. As they say, any idea is a good idea when it comes to trying to solve the problems of climate change. Well, people are paying attention. COVID-19 has brought out to us the fact that we can change. I mean, look what happened just in the last year. Hardly an airplane was flying over the whole year. We dropped the carbon dioxide levels by 10%. There were animals running in the streets. You could see fish in the Venetian canals. The people in China and Shanghai, they saw a blue sky. In other words, COVID-19 has woken us up to the possibility that we can change. We have changed. We will change. And these changes may be important enough and well accepted enough, not only to save us, our children, our communities, our countries, but the whole darn earth. It's real simple. The truth is simple and easy to understand. Diet is at the foundation of every single problem, major problem that we face in the future. The solution is clear. We have to transcend as a world to a population of people who eat a traditional diet. They eat the same diet that 99.9% of people who ever walk this earth have eaten, a diet based on starch. In other words, we're just giving up an aberration, something that is just a blip in time, and that's eating like kings and queens. Why? To save our planet. We're not doing anything weird. We're not doing anything that costs anything. We're not doing anything that hurts animals. We're not doing anything that's going to make you ill. It's going to do the opposite. All we need to do is get the truth out there. Unfortunately, it's the economics of the world and people and so on that are preventing the truth from getting out. And hopefully the time I've spent with you has been one big step to move forward and educating other people about the importance of changing to a starch-based diet. Okie dokie.
Thank you, doctor. That was amazing. And what we'd like to do is actually take some questions for you now. And in case anyone is not exactly sure what to do, what we're going to have you do, we'll take some live Q&A. What we're going to do is you press on your reactions tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen for anybody that wants to ask a question. And when you click on your reactions tab, you'll see a little thing there that says raise hand. You click raise hand. We will see your hand raised in the order in which those hands come in, and we'll go ahead and ask each of you to unmute one by one for your questions. We do ask that all questions are brief and direct for Dr. McDougall. I see the first hand raised, and thank you, everybody. Let's go ahead and jump in. Dr. McDougall, you ready?
Yeah, you bet.
All right, great. Thank you. So up next, or up first, we have Rachel. Rachel, go ahead and unmute. Thank you.
Hello. I want to know about what do you think about the COVID-19 vaccine? Do you recommend it?
Well, that's a complicated subject, but I can tell you what I recommend is the same thing that Mary and I and Heather and other members of my family have done, is to take advantage of this vaccine. But there's some hesitation. The main hesitation I have is that it's only going to be good for a short period of time because the variants are rising at such a rate, such a frequency that, even though this vaccine may work with minimal side effects, we're going to have to get boosters, so they say, very, very often. So that's my main hesitation. There are a few people who don't do well with the vaccine, but most people do. I'll tell you why I did it, why Mary and I did it, is we haven't had a chance to hold our grandchildren. We have 7 grandchildren. We haven't held them in over a year. And getting the vaccine, and we did get the vaccine ourselves. We got the J&J, just was more convenient. And at least gave us some peace of mind, some comfort. In addition to the fact that, as I told you, people who eat well, and Mary and I eat really well. People who eat well have a very low risk of going on to serious complications. I don't want to test my theories, at least with myself. So we are very careful about social distancing. We keep our contacts to a minimal. We always wear masks and, wash hands, the usual things that people do. This is a real serious illness. So, that's how I feel about it. I can understand if you have some hesitation. But the reasons I did it were, hey, it was so good to hold my grandkids. Really. Well worth it.
Thank you, doctor. Up next, we have John L. John, if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, doctor. I think most people in the seminar agree plant-based is the way to go. One of the debates is raw versus cooked. So obviously the starches that you emphasize, can any of them be eaten cooked? Raw? And if not, what's your comment on raw diet?
Well, maybe potatoes. You might get by with potatoes. They'd be kind of tough, but I think you can eat those raw. I believe that cooked food is the food of human beings. Just you date back in time, the onset of brain development in the hominoid was correlated at the same time as the introduction of fire. Just from a practical point of view, if you believe in a starch-based diet, it makes it quite impractical to eat like I recommend. In fact, I think, my thoughts when I initially think of a raw diet is let me tell you, I remember an experience. My thought when you eat a raw diet is you can eat fruit, and then you can eat nuts and seeds, or the butters of nuts and seeds. And so you're eating fruit, sugar, nuts and seeds, fat. So this is a diet of fat and sugar. Doesn't make sense. You'd never feed an entire population of people on a diet of fruits and nuts, and you can't produce enough. But you can do it on a starch-based diet. And again, that's been the diet of human beings that have people have gone to battle, won Olympic events. In fact, all of your long distance endurance athletes eat a diet similar to what I recommend. Why? Because they want to win. So I can't see raw as anything more than a theory. that is troublesome and impractical for most people. And, I'm not saying it's not unhealthy. I mean, anytime you eliminate the meat and the dairy and the oil, you're going to do much better. But again, it's kind of tough to live on sugar and fat. Complex carbohydrate, that's what they call a starch. It's what people used to eat up until they became rich. And they became rich because of the Industrial Revolution and the harnessing of fossil fuels. And then we developed a whole world where half the people live like kings and queens. They eat at Burger King, Dairy Queen. They eat imperial margarine. It's pretty easy to figure out, isn't it? Why people are sick. The important thing is to get this figured out before we don't have a chance. And the people that I follow in the scientific community say we're so far gone in this environmental destruction journey that only by the addition of massive changes in the diet of the planet will we make a difference. Everybody driving an electric vehicle, not enough. Everybody with solar panels, not enough. Changing the diet? Well, I certainly believe it's enough, or I wouldn't continue to try and get people to change. And believe me, this is all I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life, is trying to preach this message to people. Why? Because the diet that we've used for 44 years, no animal foods, the high productive value, the potato is it is the most productive of all calorie-giving trees, fruits, etc. It is the most, the potato is the most, gives you more food, more calories, in a wider range of elevations, of temperatures, of dryness of the soil. It is just an amazing food, potatoes. As a matter of fact, I did a whole talk on potatoes that you can find on our YouTube channel. It's an all-day long talk on potatoes. I'm Irish. We have a fond spot for potatoes because when potatoes were introduced into Ireland, the population of Ireland doubled. And they used to talk about the young Irish ladies and how pretty they were when they were potato eaters. I believe it. Of course, when the potato became a difficult thing to get, then they had a famine. And the English were very helpful at starving out these poor Irish. Anyway.
Thank you. Thank you. Up next, we have Deborah. Deborah, if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself. Thank you.
Oh, that's me.
Hi, Deborah. Do you have a question for Dr. McDougall?
Yes, I just want to know how he felt about the arsenic in rice.
Excuse me, say again about the
Arsenic in rice.
Oh, arsenic in rice. I think you should not be eating the arsenic in rice. But, it's kind of difficult because a lot of the rice crops are grown on soils that used to grow cotton. And cotton would get infected with the boll weevil. And the cotton farmers dumped arsenic all over their cotton and killed all the boll weevils and left the arsenic for us to eat when farmers came along and grew their rice on arsenic contaminated soils. So it'd be best if you just eat foods grown from clean soils. It's not just arsenic. Fruits are accumulators, and some of the greatest accumulators they're called hyperaccumulators, or your cruciferous vegetables. They just suck these poisons up. Anyway, I've never seen a case of arsenic poisoning. Maybe I haven't been around long enough, but I see poisoning from not eating enough rice in a lot of people. I would encourage you to get a good source of rice if you can. I'm not going to advertise any particular brands, but if they focus on the fact that they have cleaner rice, I'd buy it. Absolutely. But as far as any special cooking technique, I don't know of any. Just got to buy clean rice.
There it is. Thank you. And we're going to take on some more questions. I want to remind everybody, in case you haven't seen the notes before, we're only able to take questions when you raise your hand. We're not able to answer questions that have been typed into the chat box. including myself. So just so you know, I want to make sure you know, come up, raise your hand, click that reactions button, raise your hand, and we'll see it and get to you through that. We'll get to as many questions as we possibly can. And so that said, up next, Dr. McDougall, we have for you Jared. Jared, if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself now. Thank you.
Hey, John, I just want to say thanks for all your work that you're doing and spearheading it along with everybody else that's doing this wonderful work to try to increase the knowledge of plants and what they can do for our bodies. I just, I've been exploring a plant-based diet. I'm not plant-based completely, but definitely feel like I'm trying to do as much as I can. And I've learned a lot about phytic acid and the presence it has with nuts, beans, and grains. And I've been trying to sprout a lot of grains and nuts. And I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that. And as far as like large beans and how to make those more digestible to the body. And if you have any sources to look up or recommend to find more information on that, just your thoughts in general.
Well, I spent a good share of my life at the National Library of Medicine, and Google's pretty good too. As far as the effects of phytic acid on various minerals and making them unabsorbable, boy, it's been a long time since I've visited that particular discussion. So I won't say too much about it, but I will say that I've never run into a problem of people, phytic acid or no phytic acid, people having some kind of disease or deficiency or set up for an illness based upon a diet that contains some beans. So the other question you want to know about is whether or not you can make beans more digestible. Well, beans can contain a couple of undigestible sugars, which our intestine can't digest, but bacteria just do wonderful digesting these sugars. And so as a result, you end up with a whole bunch of gas, courtesy of these non-digestible sugars and the bacteria in your colon. Well, anything that will help digest the sugars will reduce the gas formation. So soaking, thoroughly cooking will make a big difference. There's a whole bunch of wives' tales, throw a piece of garlic in the pot of beans. I don't think that works. There's a surefire way to make beans degassed. And there's some people I know that won't eat beans unless they do this. Is what they do is they take the beans and they put them on a paper towel and let them sit there for about 12 hours. And then over the next 12 hours, they sprout. And in the sprouting process, the little green sprout that comes up, initially white, I believe, but comes up, it eats the sugars that you can't digest. And then if you cook the beans, peas, or lentils, partially sprouted, you're not going to get any gas. And that's the only way I know to completely degassed beans, peas, and lentils.
Thank you, Doctor. Up next, and I hope I'm saying your name correctly, it's Mayuri or Mayuri. Please go ahead and unmute yourself. Thank you.
Hi there. Yep, you've said my name right. Thank you, Dr. McDougall, for your talk. I'm from the UK, so hello. I was just wondering, I've seen a debate between you and Dr. Milton Mills, and regarding, it wasn't between, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. I just wondered, I don't remember a debate between myself and Mills.
It wasn't a debate, it was a panel discussion with
Dr. Mills came to my clinic, and he participated in something called an advanced study week, and he gave a phenomenal talk on anatomy and proper eating. Is that the one we're talking about, Dr. Mills?
I think it was just a conference, maybe the real truth about health.
I don't know. I could go ahead. Maybe you can remind me of, how about Barry Sears? How about Robert Atkins? I mean, these are the kind of people I've debated.
So maybe it wasn't a debate, maybe that was the wrong word, maybe just an additional point he made about the different sizes of the potatoes and wild potatoes versus the potatoes that we're now growing in the UK and America. Is that
I'm sorry, I missed that. Could you help me with what the question is?
So the question is, with regards to potatoes, is there a difference between the wild variety that, it was cultivated a long time ago? Should be worried about the size and what's going into them?
Well, there may be. I know some roots, some potatoes You know, some are more digestible than others, and I'm not expert enough on potatoes to tell you which are which, but I'm pretty sure all common variety potatoes that you get in a grocery store are going to be fine. And the next debate you'll run into is which is a yam and which is a sweet potato. And I have no idea. I've tried to figure it out. I know there's an anatomical difference. One's a monocot, the other's a dicot. But that's, again, way, way beyond me. So we'll just pick a potato. You'll be fine. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to your question. It's probably an important question, but.
Thanks, Doctor. Up next, we have Dawn. Dawn, if you'd go ahead and unmute. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. And hi, Dr. McDougall. I'm fairly new to the plant-based eating at a recommendation of my cardiologist. I'm also in a nutrition group, and about every 6 months or so, we pick a new book to read, and we happen to be reading your book right now on the starch solution.
Oh, good.
My concern, and so thank you for all the information. I'm certainly learning a lot there and here. My question for you on a personal level is around insulin resistance, right? So I'm insulin resistant for years, tested by blood and all sorts of, other symptoms and things. And I'm apprehensive to jump in and do the McDougall diet. I'd like to. What would be the concerns or risks? And, when should I test whether or not this is good, bad? I mean, sure, I could be losing weight, but how do I know what's happening with my insulin and my glucose, et cetera? So if you could maybe share a little bit about insulin resistance and eating the starch that, I'm told by the endocrinologist, stay away from.
Okay. The cure rate with weight loss, and our diet is the most effective permanent way to lose weight. The cure rate for type 2 diabetes is 100%. Okay. I say this based upon bariatric surgery studies that were published in the New England Journal of Medicine about 20 years ago, which showed at least 80% of people were cured of their type 2 diabetes simply by rearranging their intestinal tract through bariatric surgery. By definition, type 2 diabetes is due to diet. So you fix the diet, it's 100% curable. Now, as far as developing insulin, let me tell you, our experience is that if it's truly a type 2 diabetic, we take off all their pills, all their insulin, day one. Okay, if they're not truly just a type 2 diabetic, then we do a little bit of different approach. And type 1 diabetics, of course, have to always take insulin. But, you have misinformation. You have information that guarantees you'll always remain a diabetic because you're taught exactly the opposite of what you're supposed to be taught to eat well. Insulin resistance, I'll just go shortly on that. I could spend hours talking to you about diabetes. Is one of my favorite things to talk about. We take care of a lot of people with diabetes at the clinic, which reminds me, I think that's the best thing for you to do, is to join our 12-day internet program, because you need some help. You need not only education, you need your doctor taking care of you. You'll have a doctor taking care of you during our 12-day program. You'll have done all your doctor taking care of you all day long, if necessary. But we have support people that start out with you in the morning, get your blood tests, find out what your blood sugar is, and make sure you're doing well. Go over what you're going to have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner that day. You're all set up for education meetings. It's a big deal, but extremely effective. And we were able to cut the cost by about in 1/3 of what we charge you when you came to the residential program. So anyway, that's what I would encourage you to do. As far as insulin resistance goes, there's a reason you develop. It's normal to develop insulin resistance. It's a survival mechanism to develop insulin resistance. What happens when you overeat? You gain a certain amount of weight. And then it becomes a survival disadvantage to gain more weight. Say you gain 30, 40 pounds, that's good. But you got to climb up that tree to get away from that saber tiger. You got to be able to get in that little tiny cave hole to get away from the other beast. So being really big ain't so good, right? So what the body does is it develops insulin resistance. Insulin drives fat into fat cells. As you become fatter, people become more insulin resistant. And the way you cure insulin resistance is you lose the weight. Now, it's kind of an interesting bunch of patients I've taken care of during my long career, 12,000 people. And that's taking care of really big people. And I've taken care of people that have been 600, 800 pounds. That's a whole different situation. That's where people do not develop insulin resistance. Okay, the normal person, 30 pounds, 40 pounds, that's enough. Then your insulin doesn't work so good. You're not going to gain any more weight. There are people who don't develop insulin resistance. They keep shoving it in, shovel it in. And they're pretty healthy people. Surprise you. And the ones that I can think of, they didn't have high blood pressure. They didn't have diabetes. Oh, they had bad joints of the lower extremities. Sure they did. All that weight. But they didn't have the diseases associated with insulin resistance. So anyway, I hope I've shared with you the fact that the body normally develops insulin resistance. It's a survival mechanism, so you don't end up 100 pounds overweight, can't climb up the tree. And it goes away 100% of the time when you lose the weight. And 100% of the time, diabetes is curable. And you need some help. Hey, we would love to help you, and you'd consider it the best time and money you ever spent. So go to my website, drmcdougall.com. That's what I think.
Thank you, Doctor. Up next, we have David. David, if you go ahead and unmute yourself now for Dr. McDougall. Actually, it looks like we skipped over to, we're looking for David A. David A, if you'd go ahead. And
Can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
Hi, how you doing? And thank you so much, Dr. McDougall. I have two quick questions. One is, would you recommend for cooking potatoes, we steam them? Otherwise, if you bake them, you could have acrylamides. And second, what do you think of rutabagas as far as eating those compared to potatoes?
I don't know about rutabagas because they've never been a part of my diet, but as long as they have enough calories in them, they'd be a great food. You don't want to get yourself a vegetable that is deficient in calories and won't satisfy your hunger drive. Just recall, populations of people who lived on starch-based diets. Before 1980, there were 2 billion Asians and none of them were overweight. I'm old enough to have remembered the Vietnamese conflict. And we watched newsreels of town meetings where there'd be 100,000 Vietnamese in a town meeting. Nobody was overweight. Any population of people that you look at who are on a starch-based diet based on potatoes, rice, or corn, or nobody is overweight. So you've got to get those calories in, those starchy calories. So I don't know how many. Mary, do rutabagas have a lot of starchy calories? Rutabagas?
Yeah, I would think so.
You think so? Mary says she thinks they've got lots of calories. Yeah, they are a root vegetable. Anyway, I would say your concern for acrylamide, I think it's more theoretical than an actual concern, but you're right about not cooking things over 240 degrees Fahrenheit. And of course, boiling is 212. Yeah, so to be on the safe side with acrylamide, you'd want to boil as opposed to bake. But you know what? We don't do it. We bake our potatoes, we cook them. The acrylamide issue, and that's a combination, it's a Maillard reaction. M-I-L-L-A-R-D, I think, Maillard reaction. It's a combination of a sugar and a protein and produces something that may cause cancer. But in population studies, we don't see that based upon what people eat. And it's mostly, I don't want to totally discount it because there's so many things I don't really know enough about. But I would just tell you that, I haven't been that cautious about acrylamide formation.
Great. Thank you, Doctor. We have up next, we have Dave.
Mary says parsnips. Mary said parsnips would be good.
Oh.
Anyway, I got a consultant over here.
Hi, Dr. McDougall. Thank you again for everything that you do. I'm 40 years old, but I was actually born in Ukraine, and up until the age of 9, my family immigrated to the US, but I was going to comment to what you were saying is that I did remember the older generation, especially when you travel through the villages, like 80 to 90% of their diet was mostly white potatoes. And I remember seeing a documentary years ago of this older Ukrainian man somewhere in the villages, probably over 100 years old. And he said he hasn't had anything other than a white boiled potato a day for as long as he could remember. And he dedicated it to basically the white potato.
Great.
Yeah, I've always, ever since I was a kid, kind of tried to learn from the older generation. And that's something I do remember, that we ate a lot of potatoes. I mean, we're from a bigger city, but you saw the older generation, they were sufficed with just having some white potato for dinner, maybe small piece of fish or chicken, but potato was their main course. My question for you is, I noticed for myself personally, I know that you could get poison on some potatoes. For example, I'll buy a big bag at Costco, and my concern is that, I can't get through it quick enough, and it starts growing the little, the skin turns green, or, it starts growing the little roots on the sides. At what point have you ever studied, does potato start losing its nutritional value? Is that something we should be concerned about?
What you're talking about is solanine poisoning. That's what the green pigment is. It's due to spoilage, and you'll get nauseated, maybe throw up. People being killed by solanine poisoning is pretty darn rare, it's non-existent. And this just points out that you don't want to eat spoiled food. So if you have potatoes that have potato buds on them or green pigmentation, you'd at least want to cut the buds and the green out, if not throw away the whole potato. And, just fresh potatoes won't give you that problem. You store potatoes in a cool, dry place, not a refrigerator. And Mary's also got some other suggestions, but it doesn't matter. Yes.
Great. Thank you, Doctor. Up next, we have Marla. Marla, if you would go ahead and unmute yourself, and we'd love to have your question for Dr. McDougall.
Thank you,
Let me
Dr.
add some to that last question first before I forget, is you can live on white potatoes and water alone. Okay, potatoes are an anti-scurvy vegetable. They're loaded with vitamin A and C. So underground storage organs, which potatoes are, you can live on these and water alone. Above ground storage organs, which would be things like grains and legumes, they're missing vitamin A and C. So you must add a little bit of vitamin A and C, say a little piece of orange, or a little bit of asparagus or broccoli or so on. So potatoes are great food. I'm sorry, I just wanted to get that in because I was afraid I was going to forget it.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, thank you. Dr. McDougall, I'm a long-time vegan, plant-based person myself, and I appreciate your work for so many years from your first book. So I have a question. What do you recommend for a long-time vegan, whole food, plant-based person who has a SNP, a polymorphism of lipoprotein A, elevated lipoprotein A on a whole food plant-based diet? And I have one other question.
You want me to answer the first
one? Please.
Well, if you were my patient, I'd tell you to stop going for the blood tests because you're just confusing yourself. Okay? What you're doing is you're treating fractions of cholesterol, and which laboratories will go in and fractionate to death. Doesn't make any difference. It's the food. And there's going to be no special diet that you go on that you have lipoprotein A, particle size big, small, etc. They're just going to drive you crazy with all these microanalyses. So I'd say stop getting the test done. Just eat right.
Hey, I hear you, and that's a great answer. Of course, it's considered a high risk factor. That's genetic. So
yeah, but what are you going to do about your genes?
Right. There's
let's focus. And besides that, I want to say something else. Most of what people think is genetic. In other words, what they inherit from their parents is an education. See, my parents taught me to smoke. They taught me to drink alcohol. They taught me to eat eggs and bacon. I learned my diseases from my parents. And believe me, I got the same problems that my father had, my grandfather had. Mm-hmm. So, this idea that it's somehow tucked away in your DNA really condemns you. You don't have any options. You cannot fix it. So let's fix what can be fixed, which is an education.
Thank you. The other question is on, no oil, vegan, like whole food, plant-based, with some nuts and seeds, and let's say flax seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds, someone who has low essential fatty acids, dry eye, dry skin. I have that from a lot of my patients. I hear people dry and don't know, are asking what to do. And could you suggest, because this is your long time expertise?
Well, I think it is possible that people who eat a very low fat diet develop dry skin, but greasy skin ain't appealing. So I would say that that bit of message is far more important to those with greasy hair and greasy face, and not pretty if you shine like that. So, but I occasionally, I would say I've heard about people who develop some dryness of the skin on a low-fat diet. I think most of that is actually allergy. They have a little eczema, but let's just say it's due to a low-fat diet. Then my recommendation would be to add the oil from the outside, you know, to put it on your skin and to put some kind of, I don't know what a safe oil would be to put on your skin because it's absorbed. I'm sorry, did that address your question?
I think you nailed it, doctor. Thank you. She's now gone. So we're going to move on now to Lou. Lou, if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself, we're looking forward to your question as well.
Hi, Dr. McDougall. Thanks for everything. What would be your recommendation for someone who's diagnosed with end-stage renal disease? Can the starch-based diet reverse or improve that in any way?
Probably not. Probably not. End stage, you're talking about 10% of kidney function left. But even at 10% kidney function left, if you eat a very, very low protein diet, and I teach how to do this in one of my books called McDougall's Medicine, A Challenging Second Opinion. It's used, you know, I own the rights to it, so I give it away to people. But also, if you go to my website, drmcdougall.com, you look under hot topics, there's a whole discussion about diet and kidney disease. And what it boils down to is we've known for well over 100 years that people who have kidney problems, kidney failure, they get sicker and sicker and sicker the more animal foods they eat. And actually, they naturally are repulsed by animal foods. They think meat is stinky after a short period of time and some kidney failure. If you put people on a low protein diet, and sometimes you have to make it so low that the only way you can do that is to add extra sugar to the diet. Use a diet like Walter Kempner, the Kempner diet, which is you might want to look it up. It's the rice diet from Duke University. And yeah, you can slow or stop progression, but when you get down to end-stage renal disease, that's pretty far. And I'd have to say that I've helped people stay healthier and off of the dialysis equipment for a period of time. And so when will you say it's not worth it to somebody to stay out of that dialysis ward? Well, that's hell on earth. So, you know, the data's there. We've been using this for 100 years, a low protein diet based on vegetable proteins. And yes, it will slow or stop progression of kidney disease. But as far as making the kidney tissue grow back, that would be too much to expect.
Doctor, thank you. Up next, we have Carrie. Carrie P., if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Yes, hello. I'm wondering if you can speak about multiple sclerosis, and particularly, you know, these newer biologic drugs, B cell depleting, and in your opinion, is it possible to reverse multiple sclerosis if one is, you know, say in their 50s and doing pretty well at this point through changing diet?
Well, you know, I'm so anxious to tell you this story. I don't know whether I can get the words out fast enough. You know, I told you, I showed that one study we did at Oregon Health and Science University. That was done from their neurology department on treating multiple sclerosis with a low-fat diet. Now, the study didn't show as positive results as I'd hoped, but it had to do with randomization. We were dead in the water from the beginning of the onset of the study. But it doesn't matter. It's published. It's published in MS and related disorders. I showed you the journal there. And by the way, all you have to do just to find out any of the answers to these questions you have, you just go to my website, drmcdougall.com, and there's a search engine there, which is very powerful. And if you entered in multiple sclerosis, you'd see a copy of our study, which you can get off the internet anyway. You know, tremendous results we got in these patients as far as their general health is concerned. It's based on the work of Roy Swank, who was head of neurology at Oregon Health and Science University for 23 years. And Roy Swank believed, and he was a good friend of mine, I still have legal arrangements with him. He believed that you could stop the progression of multiple sclerosis essentially 100% of the time by putting people on a healthy diet, a diet in the direction that I recommend. So you want to read about Swank's work, you know, you can just look up Roy Swank. You should just have a whole bunch of really positive things come up. Published 176 papers, Dr. Swank has. He's famous for many things, but he was head of neurology at Oregon Health and Science University for 23 years. And he's the reason that I got involved in the treatment of multiple sclerosis with a healthy diet, which I believe you can stop the disease. You can't get it. I mean, you're not going to get it back, what you lost. You know, the bladder function is not going to come back. You know, the eyesight's not going to come back. It's permanent destruction, but you could stop the attacks. As far as the drugs go, they poison the they poison the immune system. You know, the disclaimers that come along with these drugs make you think twice. The drugs are described as criminally expensive by people who I know who know. Criminally expensive, $50,000, $75,000 a year just for the drug. And the toxicity is significant, and the benefits are minimal. So you're being oversold with the drugs, plain and simple. I guess that's the best way to generalize it. And it's a sad thing that every doctor who deals with people with multiple sclerosis doesn't recommend the swank diet or our modification of the swank diet, which I think is, you know, better and healthier and more practical. You choose. Go to my website, drmcdougall.com. It's all free. It's all free, folks. It's free this month, next month, 6 months from now, 10 years from now. It's all free. At least the information on the website. We'll charge you if you come to our 12-day telemedicine program, though. Best money you'll ever spend.
Thanks for that, doctor. And up next, we have Karina. Karina, if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself. We're looking forward to your question for Dr. McDougall.
Hello.
Hi, Karina.
Hi, Dr. McDougall. I have a question. What's your opinion for about protein powders?
Dangerous.
Oh, okay.
I did another seminar. I do these seminars. My daughter and I do them together, and we do them as a service to the public. And they're under my YouTube channels, which is Dr. McDougall. And they're called Mastermind. If you look up McDougall and the word mastermind, you'll run into all these conferences we've been doing lately, and one is on potatoes. You know, I mean, I talked to you for 4 hours about potatoes, and one is about protein and how dangerous it is to consume excess protein, how there's no such thing as dietary protein deficiency. Nobody has ever developed protein deficiency from eating any natural diet. It's impossible. But people, millions, you know, maybe half the population of the world suffers from problems of protein excess because they buy into the pitch from the meat and dairy industry and the protein powder industries. This is a dangerous lie. Anyway, you'll find the whole series of lectures, again, 4 hours on protein. I did 16 hours on diet and climate, all free. I mean, we really try and give everything away free. And I mean really free. We won't charge you later. It's really, really free.
Doctor, thank you. Up next, we have Christine. Christine H., if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Hi, doctor. Thank you. I'm a type 2 diabetic and been on the vegan diet, starch-based diet since January.
Good.
And my blood sugar is going up and up and up. It was over 200 this morning, and I'm just wondering if I should worry about that.
Are you trim? How tall are you?
I'm 5'8".
Okay. Are you fewer than 125 pounds?
I'm 195.
Okay. Well, until you get to be 125 pounds or less, you can't declare yourself a failure. Okay. So you got what, another 70 pounds to lose. And once you do that, then you can find out whether or not you truly are a type 2 diabetic, because you may not be. There's a spectrum between type 1, where you don't produce any insulin, and type 2, where you produce as much insulin as the general population, sometimes twice as much insulin. It's just the insulin doesn't work because of insulin resistance created by being too fat. Okay, but in between, there's a spectrum of partial pancreatic insufficiency, partial inability of the pancreas to make enough insulin for your needs. You make enough insulin to, say, keep you out of the hospital, but not enough insulin to make your blood sugar go down to normal. So I would guess a couple of things. One, don't declare yourself incurably ill. You've got another 70 pounds to go. And you'll get there eating a starch-based diet. I mean, the body naturally doesn't want to weigh what you weigh now. And so it will lose the weight. You just got to make sure you stay away from the nuts and seeds and avocados and other fatty, oily foods. They make you fat. A lot of sugar is not a good idea either, even though sugar does not make diabetes worse. Actually, sugar makes insulin work more efficiently, but that's a whole other story. You'll have to read the science. You'll have to read the research to figure that one out. What do you think? A lot of people out there give you their opinions without knowing the science or research. Anyway, all this, all this stuff is free on my website, like the diabetes thing. I don't know. Anyway, it's if you just look on the search and put in diabetes, you'll find 2 articles I've written, one 20 years ago and one 20 months ago on diabetes. And as I say, every diabetic has a better life when they change their diet, because diabetics are destined to blindness, kidney failure, early death, cancers, all kinds of things. So you're blessed with a better life once you change your diet, even if you can't get off your insulin. All type 2 diabetics can get off their insulin or their diabetic pills. All. People who have type 1.5 diabetes, in other words, that spectrum, partial pancreatic insufficiency, they may need some insulin. If they lose too much weight, I put them on a little insulin. If they develop too frequent urination, I put them on a little insulin. If they worry about their blood sugar numbers, I sometimes put them on a little insulin. And there's type 1 diabetics who make no insulin, absolutely require insulin injections, absolutely.
Thank you, doctor. And up next, we have Lisa B, if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Dr. McDougall. It's so
Hello.
nice to see you in person. I've been following you. I've been vegan almost 3 years now. And I follow you and Dr. Pam Popper and Dr. Esselstyn. I watch all your videos on YouTube. I can't find a plant-based doctor in my area for nothing. I live close to Santa Barbara. And all the doctors I seem to get, I tell them I'm vegan, plant-based. They tell me I need to make out a will. I don't know what I'm talking about. They don't seem to know who any of you plant-based doctors are. And so I'm having a hard time trusting anything they say. One doctor told me that I need to get off my 50 microgram Synthroid that I've been on for 15 years. She did an antibodies test and said I don't have hypothyroid anymore. So is that a test that you would trust to decide if
It's called a TSH test, thyroid stimulating hormone. Yeah, I would trust that, but you need to get it 6 weeks after you stop taking the supplement. You can't get it right away. You can't stop the supplement and then get the TSH level. You have to wait about 3 to 6 weeks before you repeat the test to see if your thyroid is functioning normally. So as far as picking a doctor, ma'am, hey, you're the customer. You should pick somebody who can do the things you need done. For example, if you have plastic surgery done, you want to have an artist. If you're having a baby, you want to have a good catch. You know, you just want to hire somebody who has the talents that you're looking for. For my patients, I tell them to get out of the business, get away from doctors, get away from pills. And the way you do that safely is you eat well. You stop the cause of the problem, which is the food. I hope you picked that up so far. It's the food. So you get yourself healthy. Nobody else is going to tell you how to eat. You already figured it out. You've been with us for 3 years. You already figured it out. And, you just need somebody who will provide the services that you want. You're worried about your thyroid, any general doctor can check those tests for you. The other thing, hey, I'll throw out as another option is once you become a McDougall patient, then we will take care of you for life through our telemedicine program. That's the only way we take outside patients. You have to enroll in the 12-day program. And the reason is because I'm tired of one-night stands, ladies and gentlemen. I am tired of seeing people for 7 minutes and then expecting me to make a big difference in their life. It just doesn't happen. So for the last 44 years, I've refused to take people from the outside into the practice unless they're willing to dedicate some of their life, some of their time to learn how to take care of themselves. I cannot take care of you. I give you some advice, but you got to take care of yourself.
With that, doctor, we appreciate that. Thank you. We have Lou is back for another question. Lou, go right ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Thanks. Dr. McDougall, I've heard you talk about this. I've also seen a video by Nathan Phytic where you interviewed him address this. But I'd like to ask directly, what do you believe, in your opinion, what causes psoriatic arthritis, and can the starch-based diet do anything to reverse that?
Well, Nathan Phytic used to tell me, and he was one of my most important mentors, by the way. If you want to hear an interview I did with Nathan Phytic, and it's the only interview that exists. The only video that exists was one that I took when I was a very young doctor. And you can play that video in its entirety. If you go to my website, drmcdougall.com, and you go to the February 2013 newsletter, a whole interview with Nathan Phytic. And he used to tell me that you've never seen a case of psoriatic arthritis that didn't clear up with a healthy diet. Walter Kempner with the rice diet, he also reported people with psoriatic arthritis and psoriatic lesions, and he had same results. They cleared up. And that's been my experience too. Why? I don't know. I think Nathan Phytic talks about microcirculation of the skin and the joints. It's an autoimmune disease. And my May 2014 newsletter discusses autoimmune diseases in some detail and why it's animal proteins that incite these diseases. We're animals. When you eat foreign animals, like foreign thyroid glands, what happens is the body makes antibody to pig and cow thyroid. It's not you. It makes antibodies to them, but it's enough you so that it attacks your own thyroid gland. So where do you eat cow and pig thyroid glands? Well, how do you eat those? Hot dogs, sausages. We waste nothing in the slaughterhouse. Everything goes into the sausages. Oh, anyway, that's how you get autoimmune diseases. It's a process called molecular mimicry. And in the case of psoriasis, it's probably an attack in the blood vessels and the skin cells and the joints. I mean, people with psoriatic skin lesions have a lot of arthritis. In fact, the arthritis is really fun to take care of because they get well so fast.
Doctor, thank you for that. We have next Elaine. Elaine, if you'd go ahead and, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
You are. Thank you. Dr. McDougall, I have two quick questions, right? One's more theoretical. The first is, you mentioned MS. What do you think of the Terry Walls protocol for MS? Thumbs up, thumbs down. And the second question is, can you distinguish resistant starches from starches in general, and further distinguish those from insoluble and soluble fiber? Thank you.
Okay, I'm not an expert on Terry Walls, but I do remember she teaches the paleo diet. And she's a study of one. That's herself. To date, I mean, maybe she's done a study. But the research I'm talking about, which uses something very different than the paleo diet. I mean, we share in the fact that neither of us recommend dairy, but their diet is based on eating animals. I have a real problem with eating animals, ladies and gentlemen. It took me many years to develop that consciousness. So, like I say, she's a study of one. Swank has studies of 5,000. We've got studies of, well, less than 100. But anyway, that's what I think about using the paleo diet to treat MS, as Dr. Walls does. And all the science behind what I recommend is on our website. We have a treasure trove. We have 8,000 pages on our website. Treasure trove of information on all kinds of problems, diseases. Is a free 12-day program. As I said, basically everything's free, not just this month, but next month and 6 months from now. It's going to be free.
Thank you for that, doctor. And with that, we have now Peter up next. Peter, if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself, please. Hi, Peter. Just waiting for you to unmute.
Yeah, I was trying to move the cursor. Yeah, Dr. McDougall, I dropped you a note earlier to say I think I'm alive now because of you and Dr. Esselstyn. But yeah, since bypass surgery in 2015, I've lost about 60 pounds, got about another 40 to go. But one thing that's come up since the surgery is atrial fibrillation. And I couldn't find anything in your website or others about whether I can expect to dispose of that problem by sticking to the program.
Right. No, you can't. You should not expect atrial fib to reverse itself. Atrial fibrillation, I believe, is due to small blood vessel disease of the heart muscle. You don't see it on an angiogram. You could do an angiogram, you know, where they stick the catheter in your heart arteries and you would see no blockages. It's the little tiny vessels. And it's based on the fact that people who eat a high cholesterol, high fat diet have the ones that have atrial fib. Once you get it, it's usually permanent. There's ablation techniques, which again, you'd have to explore yourself. Nothing I'm that familiar with. Otherwise, you stay in atrial fibrillation. It's not such a dangerous arrhythmia. It's not, doesn't bother the function of anybody except for maybe athletes if you lose that function and have atrial fib. There are a whole bunch of debates that come up as to whether or not you should take cardioversion. I would say no. Whether or not you should use various kinds of drugs. I have a very limited number of drugs I use with atrial fib. They're digoxin and a beta blocker. And whether or not you should put somebody on a blood thinning drug like the new drugs Eliquis, the old drug Coumadin. And this is a big debate because these drugs cause you to bleed. They could kill you. And you want to make sure that you really are a candidate where you're more likely to have benefits and risks. And so my patients, and of course anybody who comes to our clinic by internet, you can't fly out and see us anymore, is we make sure that they understand how to properly evaluate drug therapies. Our doctors are trained to do that. How to evaluate drug therapies and decide whether or not taking one of these blood thinners will do you more harm than good. And in general, what it turns out, like for example, when you use the CHADS score, CHADS, the CHADS scoring method, it turns out that people are in good health. People who, by the way, follow our diet end up in this kind of characteristic good health. They should not be on these blood thinning medications. Only sick people are very likely to have strokes or to be on this kind of medication. So most of my medications don't even require based on legitimate, standard doctor protocols. They don't require having blood thinners. Some do, but most don't. Hey, we're real doctors. We don't do anything weird. We just take care of people by using standard medicine, the best medicine out there with the majority opinions backing it. Why do something weird when you're just doing something normal is so dramatic? Good grief. We've already met people who've lost 60 pounds on this show. Now we have people who lose 40, 50, 60, 100 pounds, and they've lost it for a lifetime, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 decades. We have people who are getting off of all their insulin. In fact, most people with type 2 diabetes get off all their pills, off their insulin. We get well over 90% of people off all their diabetic medications. People throw away their antacids and their laxatives. Why? Very simple. Because it's the food. They're suffering from food poisoning. It's the food that's making them sick. The food poisons are animal foods and oils. And if you switch to a starch-based diet, in other words, rice, corn, potatoes, sweet potatoes, pastas, breads, the staff of life. When did bread become so evil? It's always been the staff of life. Excuse me, it's like somebody's lying to you. Once you switch to this kind of diet, then you get your health back. And you don't solve problems like if you walk out in the middle of the street and get hit by a car, you still break your bones. But you don't get dietary diseases, the common cancers, the constipation, the oily skin, the heart attacks. These are diseases of rich foods, diseases that were once only available to kings and queens. Now everybody's so rich in the United States and China. China, China before 1980, they had a population where there were close to 2 billion people, and they lived on a diet of white rice. 90% of their diet was white rice, and essentially nobody was overweight, and essentially nobody had type 2 diabetes. That was 1980. So what is this? This is 40 years later. Now they have a population of people where they report at least 12% of the people are diabetic, and half have pre-diabetes. Well, have you seen what's happened to China in the last 40 years? Gone from, rather impoverished population living on rice and, not really having all the advantages of Americans. And while they saw CNN News and they want to eat just like Americans and live just like Americans. And so China has the second highest number of Tesla supercharger stations in the world, second only to the United States, where we have a population of 14% are diabetic. So what's your conclusion? Teslas cause diabetes.
Thank you for that.
That was a joke.
Thank you, Doctor. Up next, we have Elaine. Elaine, if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, doctor. I just have a question. What's your take on air fryers? And if you don't recommend them, like what are some cooking tools or gadgets that you tend to use?
Air fryers. Mary says they're good.
Oh, okay.
Mary's sitting over here. Just she's kind of my live audience. Anyway, she says they're good. Brings up the issue of acrylamide that we talked about earlier. Those of you who are worried about acrylamide, I gave you my thoughts on it, which is produced at high temperatures. I think fryers use high temperatures. But otherwise, you don't want to fry with oil. And if this gives you a way of heating things without oil, that's the main problem. There's nothing wrong with the potatoes are the ideal food, but French fries, they have 40 times as much fat as a potato. It's the French fries, it's the sour cream and the butter on the baked potato. That's what's making people fat and sick. You know that.
Thank you for that, Doctor. And up next we have, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, is it Roanne? You're up next if you can unmute yourself. Thanks. Oh, actually, I think you were unmuted and I messed that up. So go ahead and try that one more time for us, Roanne.
Is that good? Can you hear me?
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. Hi, Dr. McDougall. I've been following you for a long time too. And I joined a little late, so I don't know. You might have gone over this and you can disregard if you have, of ER, PR, breast cancer positive, HER negative breast cancer with your diet, which I've been on forever, and just too much oils, which I've totally knocked out. But just curious, if you've already gone over this, I'm sorry, but if you haven't.
We didn't get over this, but it's a little detailed for this audience. Estrogen receptor positive, estrogen receptor negative are important subcategories in people who have breast cancer, just like progesterone receptor positives and negatives, and Herceptin positives and negatives. There are all kinds of subtypes that doctors try and evaluate for the woman with cancer, with the idea that we can better target the chemotherapy. I'm not a big believer in chemotherapy for any kind of cancer, much less breast cancer. There are some exceptions, but in general, these drugs are poisons that were developed during World War II as nerve gases. And they're very non-specific, and unfortunately kill the host, that means the person, as fast, if not faster, than they kill the tumor. The estrogen receptor is important in the sense that if you deprive the tumor of estrogen, and you can do that by taking your ovaries out, which is what I recommend usually, or you can use tamoxifen or aromatase inhibitors, which are drugs that block the effects of estrogen. So that's the other way you can do it, or you can take cancer chemotherapy, the standard cancer chemotherapy, which works by castrating you, kills your ovaries. I've always felt it's much more humane to put a woman through simple laparoscopy surgery to take out her ovaries as opposed to making her throw up for a year and losing her hair. But, that's just me. I'm a GP. No, I'm not. I'm an internist. I'm a board certified internist. So maybe it says a little bit more about my education. I'm not sure. I'm a doctor that really, really has enjoyed taking care of patients for a half a century. That's what I am. And a grandfather too. Don't forget that. We got to work at saving the planet. We got to go out and tell everybody that the cows are killing us. You know, they're killing people. So are the rest of the animals that, you know, are domesticated. We got to stop this. We can do it.
Doctor, thank you. Up next, we have, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Marjolaine, and I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute as well.
Good day, Mr. McDougall. I'm a great fan and like to see your, oh God, I'm a Dutch girl, so it's a bit difficult for me. But I have Hashimoto's and I read on your website, you had a newsletter from 2005. And you said when you have Hashimoto's, you cannot get off thyroid medication. What is your opinion about it now?
It's still the same. See, Hashimoto was a Japanese scientist who described autoimmune thyroiditis, where the body attacks itself and destroys the thyroid gland. That was in like 1917, he described it. Anyway, that's why they call it Hashimoto's. It means the body attacks itself. Your doctors usually say you have autoimmune thyroiditis. In other words, the body autoimmune attacks the thyroid gland and causes it to be inflamed, autoimmune thyroiditis. And once it attacks and kills, you cannot regrow the thyroid cells. So, you know, unfortunately, if you truly have hypothyroidism due to destruction of the thyroid gland, it's not going to grow back. And thyroid supplementation, and I use levothyroxine. I don't use the natural armor type. You know, stick your nose in a bottle of armor and you know why I don't use it. It's made from cow and pig thyroid glands, and it brings along with every capsule a whole bunch of viruses and prions and other microbes that may threaten your health. So anyway, that's why I use the levothyroxine. But you can check. The only way you can tell that whether or not you need thyroid medications, you have to make an agreement with your doctor that you're going to stop the medication. And you're going to see what happens over the next 3 to 6 weeks. And in 3 to 6 weeks, if your thyroid gland works, then it'll start working. You can see it by a simple test called a TSH test, thyroid stimulating hormone. So, you know, that's the way you do it. I don't know of any other test that's out there. You got to see if your own gland kicks in. If it doesn't, you may have to be on thyroid medication the rest of your life, which is not a big deal because it's a very well-tolerated medication.
Thank you, Doctor. Up next, we have Carol. Carol, when you can, go ahead and unmute yourself for your question for Dr. McDougall. Carol B, if you can hear us, go ahead and unclick your, there we go. Hi, Carol. Carol, are you there? We can't quite hear you. I see that your mute is unmuted. However, we're not hearing you, Carol. Can you turn your volume up? Carol, I'm sorry. We're going to try you back once more time, but for now, let's go to, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Mayuri. Go ahead and unmute yourself, please. Again, Mayuri, if you're able to unclick your mute button. Let's try one more time with Carol. Carol, are you able to? Hi, Carol, we see you unmuted. Are you there? Carol, I'm sorry, I'm not sure what's happening, but we're not able to hear you. So if you can, check back into us later. We're going to move over to Kurt now. And Kurt, I'm going to ask you, Kurt Z, if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself. Kurt Z, are you able to unmute yourself? Hey, everybody. There should be an unmute button there for you, Kurt. Are you able to hit that? Thanks for hanging in there with us, Doctor. Let's move on to Roanne is back. Roanne, are you able to click your unmute button? Oh, actually do it one more time, Roanne. If you can unclick that one more time, Roanne, I think we had you. Roanne, if you could.
How's that?
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I just came back because Dr. McDougall, I'm not interested in like the conventional route necessarily with chemo and such. I was just more curious with the breast cancer question of specifically your starch solution diet and
Yes.
that.
Yeah, I did the first study on the dietary treatment of breast cancer that, as far as I know, was ever published. I published it in the 1980s. I still believe what I believed then, and that is if you change your diet, you'll live certainly better and you'll live longer. Now, even though I published this study in 1984 in the journal Breast, it took a long time for the American Cancer Society to come to similar conclusions, but they did it in February 13th, 2015. The American Cancer Society came up with recommendations that doctors teach their patients a diet in the direction of the diet that I recommend who have cancer. It should be part of their fundamental therapy. That's the conclusion of the American Cancer Society, is that doctors need to teach basic nutrition, plant-based nutrition to people who have cancer of the colon, breast, and prostate. But do you think that that's going on to any level of reality? Do you think there's any doctors out there teaching their patients about good eating? A few, but not very many. And one of the main problems is it has never been done before. You know, medicine has always been a drug pushing business or a device or a surgical procedure business. It's never been one of self-healing. Yeah, I guess we did with smoking, didn't we? Self-healed by telling people to quit smoking. I guess we did with alcohol, didn't we? Told people they could get well if they could quit the booze. I bet properly given advice to the American public and the rest of the world, we change our diet to cure overweight, which affects 80% of the people, obesity, which affects 20 to 30% of people in Western countries, type 2 diabetes, which affects about 12 to 15% of the population. Half the people on the Western diet are pre-diabetic. Everybody's sick. Everybody's sick. If you just tell them why they're sick, will they change? I don't know. I keep trying. I really keep trying. And COVID-19 has shown you that you can change. Yes, you can. And some of you have had the experience. You've told me about how you can heal yourself by switching from the foods that are poisonous, the animal foods and the oils, to a starch-based diet with fruits and vegetables. Well, please believe that we can heal the planet by a massive change towards a starch-based diet. It's got to be starch-based. Vegan's not going to do it. It's got to be starch-based. Why? Because that's the diet, the traditional diet of human beings. Well, it goes back hundreds of thousands of years. So simple. I mean, it's frustrating, isn't it, to have something so stupid simple to result in such good outcomes for the planet and people. I've been pushing it for the people for the last 44 years without, well, I can't say I've had some success. I have. Mary and I really made a very positive difference in a lot of people's lives. And I hear that from you. You know, I very much appreciate hearing you found us 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and we've made a real difference in your life. But as I say, we have a big job ahead of us, and that's we've got to save planet Earth. And that means we got to change the food. So whatever talent you have, you know, if you happen to be a writer and write stories about it, if you happen to be an actress and actor, or, you know, act out some stuff, whatever you do, you know, do music, well, throw in a bit of dietary advice with your music. Just look great. Just look great. And people come up to you and say, how do you look so great? And then you tell them. But we've got a message that needs to be spread. It's good news.
Doctor, thank you. I think, you know, we've got so many questions and it's difficult for us to get to everybody. We thank everybody for all of your questions. I think we've got time for one more quick one, if that's okay.
Sure.
And
it's been fun for me. I I've had a good time.
And amazing for us. Thank you. So let's go to Kurt Z. Kurt, if you're able to unmute yourself, and let's see if our tech team can help you out with that this time around. Let's see. Kurt, hopefully you can unmute yourself. I know we had a little bit of a tech.
I don't think he's there.
Okay, got it. Let's try Carol B one more time. Carol, are we able to hear you?
Well, where you're working on it, I hope I've stimulated people's curiosity, at least to wonder why in the world I say the things that I do, even though I hope you find me speaking very clearly. And I hope you find what I have to say easy to understand. But if I stimulated you enough, I hope you will go to my website, which is drmcdougall.com. And as I say, there's what, 500, 600, 700 recipes that are free. All the things that we talked about thyroid, about heart disease, and there are articles I've written that are free. And there are a whole bunch of videos and lectures that I've given, at least 30 lectures that I've given that are free. It's free. And it focuses on the food. We're all about the food. One thing that the McDougall team can do, I think, as well, if not better than anybody else, and I have to say this is our claim of expertise, is we can get people to embrace the food, all the way from understanding to getting rid of the myths, to helping people pick the right things to enjoy, and maybe some minor variations in terms of their particular health problems. We're all about the food. Yeah, other people can talk about how we're deforesting the planet and how fossil fuels are doing horrible damage. And if you haven't seen Seaspiracy, go to Netflix and see Seaspiracy. You want to know about the oceans. It goes right along with Cowspiracy. Lots of people are bringing this very important message to the people on this planet. But the one thing the McDougall team can do, and one thing we're going to do, is we're going to teach people about the food. I've done this for the last 44 years. And if I have another 20 left, I'll spend it teaching you about the food, how to do it, how to cut your food bill by 80%, how to make life really enjoyable for you and your family and your community. Thanks for the opportunity.
For all of that, Dr. McDougall, we are so, so grateful. And in fact, I'm going to ask my tech team right now, if you can unmute everybody. I know everybody wants to show their appreciation. Let us hear it, everybody.
I just want to say thank you to the.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. McDougall. Thank you. Wonderful. Loved it.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. I love the